Alrighty, so today we are going to do the season preview of St. Louis City. So there's no doubt that St. Louis is looking to try to make it back to the playoffs. I mean, we saw what happened last season where they suffer a bit of a sophomore slump, and partially is due to the fact that they didn't really quite improve the team last season, and they waited way too long to get those reinforcements that they desperately needed, and hence that's why they missed out on the playoffs. But with the way how good they were in the second half of the season, there is a question as whether or not if it can translate heading into this season, because we've seen before where teams can have an incredible second half of the season, and then more times or not, it doesn't really translate into the new season as well. And especially, I think the other thing that not to be a little bit pessimistic about whether they can carry that second half momentum into this season, but the question is that they are under a new head coach in Olaf Melberg, and that they did definitely made a big decision in terms of not decided to promote John Hatworth as their permanent head coach, and we'll see whether this new head coach will continue the momentum that they had in the second half of last season into this one. And one thing that St. Louis also have done heading into this season and in this entire offseason, just like they did last year, they didn't really make a lot of changes to their roster. Though it is understandable because again, last season most of the signings and most of the reinforcement that they desperately needed were done in the summer, and that kind of left with them not really need to make too much move to once again get themselves back to where they were in their expansion season, which is a playoff team. Now, as I said, last season it was a bit of a disaster. It was a sophomore slump kind of season for the St. Louis City side. Finished 8, 13, and 13 and finished with 37 points. I actually didn't put where they finished in the standings. I think they finished 12th in the standing, if I'm not mistaken, and obviously they did not make it to the playoffs. The last playoff appearance was their expansion year in 2023, but they're still looking for their first playoffs series win as well, of course, in that 2023 season. Even though they made history of becoming the first ever expansion team to finish at the top of their respective conference in the expansion season, it was a one and done, and it was a painful one and done in the hands of their biggest rival, Sporting KC. Now, the head coach of this team, of course, it's the new head coach, Olaf Maltberg. He, of course, is going to take charge of this team in his first season. But their sporting director, it's Lutz Still. He's been here since 2020. He's been here for a while now, even going back to the USL days that St. Louis City has, and even in their days playing in the MLS Next Pro as well. Now, looking at some of the transfer that they made, again, they really didn't do a lot of signing at all, and are and pretty much are considered to complete the fewest move out of any teams in MLS this offseason, because I don't think there's any team I've seen like St. Louis where they only make like two moves, and one of those moves was bring Timo Bungar as a free transfer to booster their defense. Then they also signed Conrad Wall, then a loan from SK Prague to kind of booster their midfield a little bit. In terms of players that's no longer on this team, we saw John Klein. His option was declined. The same goes for Jake Nowinski. Jose Kojima, of course, was picked up in the expansion draft, but San Diego immediately trade that expansion draft pick to DC United for some general allocation money. They also loaned Nikolai Forensen to Spartak Rotterdam. And then lastly, they also have Samir Pedro loaned to FK Veles Mostad as the only transfer that they made. Again, not a lot of moves that they made at all this offseason. Now, looking at the first 5 games of the season, they start their season opener against the Colorado Rapids, and then they are the recipient of the team to get to play against San Diego FC and become the first visitor at Snapdragon Stadium, play against San Diego FC. And also, just a little bit of a newsflash, I'm actually going to be going to that game. I already bought tickets to that game. I'm very excited to attend that game as well, and potentially see history of San Diego scoring their first goal at their new stadium, and also maybe even get themselves their first ever win playing at home for the very first time in their franchise history. But after that, they got to face against the defending MLS Cup champion, that is the LA Galaxy. If this is going to be something similar to what we saw last year when St. Louis played against the Galaxy, where I think that game ended like what, free at the end of the game, yeah, sign me up for it, because that was a very entertaining match between these two teams. Then they play against the Seattle Sounders before go on the road to play against the Philadelphia Union. So yeah, there are some opponents that you could say that they could get wins, but then there are also some tough teams that they have to face. In Olaf Melberg for first couple of games in charge of this team. But looking at the last 5 games, they have to go on the road to play against Montreal on September 13th before going on the road again to play against the San Jose Earthquakes. Then they return home to play against LAFC before going on the road for the last time to play against Austin FC, and then they return home for their decision day matchup against Real Salt Lake. So not an easy finish to the end of the season as well. I mean, there are some teams that they could definitely win as well, but there are definitely some really tough teams that they have to face with the likes of LAFC and even a much improved Austin team on the road. That's not going to be an easy task as well, especially they really struggled last season on the road. Now, the strength of this team, obviously, I'm going to say it's the attack of this team, even if there is question in terms of that number 9 position, which I kind of find it interesting that people have question about the St. Louis number 9 position. I mean, I guess the question is, do they put Jao Klaus there, or are they going to stick with Simon Betcher, who really did very well last season coming into this team as well. But overall, the attack is really strong. We know the summer signing that they of course got the likes of Teuscher and Hardo. Both of those guys really hit the ground running, and overall, this attack should be just as good as what we saw when they were on a really good run of form to finish up the season. And again, hoping that it can continue heading into this season. Now, the weakness of this team, I'm still gonna say it's the defense. Again, I know they have make some signings to improve, and getting Timo Pardo, that is definitely a big piece to at least solidify their defense. But last season they kind of tried to do the same thing in terms of improve their defense. I forgot who exactly they signed in terms of trying to help that out. They definitely signed a couple of German players to improve that defense, and St. Louis love to sign German player that is. But yeah, that it didn't really quite improve that defense whatsoever. And again, there was multiple time when Roman Burke had to bail out this defense, and really the reason why St. Louis didn't give up as much goal as they did last season was Roman Burke simply at times do some bailed out job. So I think this season is probably going to be that case again, though that weakness might be correct if Timo Gardo can get things going from the start and really boost that defense. The depth in the midfield and the wingback position, that is going to be another concern, I would say, about this St. Louis City side. I mean, the thing about this St. Louis City side, when I look at the midfield, it's okay, but there is no doubt that they would need more depth in terms of that spot, especially of course some of the players that they lost in the off season as well. And the wingback position, that is another area that they of course needed as well, because one of their starting wingback got injured throughout the off season, and now they need some depth in terms of that spot as well. Now, the three big question of this St. Louis City side. So as I mentioned already, throughout this video, I talked about, can they ride that momentum they had in the second half of the season into this year as well? We've seen teams have been able to do so, and then we also seen teams that aren't able to do so. And that anytime when you're under a new head coach, I would say that, I wouldn't be surprised if this team can get off to a decent start again, especially, one, when you are having a new head coach, you're going to get the new head coach boost, and also you're going to usually do well with a new head coach, because the other team probably don't have a book in terms of what exactly Olaf Melberg has in his sleeve. I don't think, in terms of from what I heard from St. Louis fan, he's going to be anything like what we see with Bradley Carnell, and playing that energy drink soccer kind of style. I think that energy drink soccer style, now it's all been gone for the St. Louis team. They're not going to play that style anymore. They're going to be more of a possession team, like what we saw under John Hackworth, and it kind of worked pretty well for them to a point where, again, teams, I think when they prepare against St. Louis, they were kind of hoping that, well, as long as we bypass the original press, it will of course work well. But yeah, once that the architect of really putting this team as a pressing team, and that head coach no longer there, it was a little bit more difficult in terms of preparing a game plan of how to deal with this St. Louis side, and especially they do have the players to break down a low block, which is something that a lot of teams were trying to do against St. Louis because St. Louis in their early days they were really struggling in terms of dealing with that. Do they need to sign more depth? Of course, in terms of the midfield and the wing back. So as quiet as they are this offseason, you would expect maybe they might be thinking about signing some more depth players. I mean, there are still some free agency out there in MLS that they could definitely bring in. So we'll see whether or not if they can do so. And it's also important to know that the transfer window it doesn't actually they close when the regular season starts. Actually close I think somewhere around April if I'm not mistaken. So teams can still add pieces in the beginning of the season as well, and maybe that's is going to be one area that St. Louis is going to do, and maybe that is also one area that a lot of teams is going to do, especially with the beginning of the season. A lot of teams are going to see how it's going to work out, and if it doesn't work out, then they definitely are going to try to make some trades or maybe sign some free agent to booster up their team. And then I think the last big question I think we have the St. Louis City side goes back to what I said about Joe Claus and the fact that do they move on from him? He is going to be in his final year of his contract, and it's sad to see the career of Joe Claus doing his time with St. Louis because I remember when he arrived in the team, he was absolutely electric, and then that injuries really kind of set him back, and he just really never looked like the same ever since that injury that he suffered after just being one of the most electric number nine in the league in the first couple of games and was really one of the big part of why St. Louis was so good coming out of the gate. But with him not being very effective, and him kind of sitting on a DP spot, St. Louis is definitely hoping that they can move on from him, and it could be as soon as this summer as well. Because if they open a DP spot on that, they can definitely use that to I have here some people say that they might go for a DP9. I don't think so. I think what Simon Betcher did when he came into this team, I think this kid is for real. I think he can be a legitimate 10 or 15 goal scored in this league. And let's also not forget that they also have a very talented number 9 in their St. Louis City next pro team in Caden Glover. He's a guy that could also step in and has a lot of talent, even played for the US youth national team as well. So yeah, overall, I don't think they necessarily need to replace Joe Claus, so they do need to move on from him. But ideally, they the one thing that they really want is to open up a DP spot, and especially when you know that you have a DP that is not performing at the rate that they should be, you have to find a way to try to open that spot. And again, the good news for St. Louis is that he is in his final year of contract, and unless if he play out of his mind again and look like the João Claus when he bursts into the scene with St. Louis, I think the decision are probably going to be pretty easy of what St. Louis is going to do with João Claus. They probably might be moving on from him in the winter transfer window and maybe even in the summer transfer window as well if there is offer for him as well. So the expectation for this St. Louis side, it's obviously playoffs. I mean, there's no doubt that last season, again, I've said it so many times about the St. Louis City side when it comes to last season. What if they make those signings a little sooner? What if they brought in the likes of Toysher and Hardo and all those summer reinforcement that Lutz did with this team? If they did that a little sooner, this would have been a playoff team. This would have absolutely been a playoff team and a team that could be very dangerous heading in the playoff as well. But alas, it was not meant to be. They made those moves relatively late, and now they're gonna have to prove that heading into this season. After having an incredible second half of this season after making those moves, can they continue heading into this season? Because if they can do so, they're a dark horse team heading into this year, and this is a side that just like the St. Louis side in the first season, it's going to be a very tricky team, and it's a team that you kind of don't want to face when they're at their best. But there you have it. That is pretty much it. Looking at St. Louis City in the season preview. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this season preview, and if you're a St. Louis City fan, what do you think is the strength, the weakness, the free big question, and the expectation is heading into this season for the St. Louis City side. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.